They threatened me. He reloaded the machine pistol.
Military equipment was coming from Russia, and caravans of trucks loaded with grain and corn were heading toward Russia.
Put your hands up. I'm standing. I thought that was it. They would shoot me.
The issue of civilian survival is one of the main problems of the first months of Russian aggression against Ukraine. Survival under constant shelling. And at the same time, the lack of food and even water supplies. Hence, the organization of a massive volunteer movement involving people of different professions and incomes.
From the very first days of the war, a decision was made to establish SHR humanitarian headquarters. These are proactive people who are here. They help Kharkiv citizens every day.
In April 2022, Kharkiv volunteers became aware of a food crisis in the Russian-occupied territory of Slobozhanshchina. To what extent was the food crisis in Kharkiv and the region only a consequence of the hostilities? The project Kharkiv Region, Destroyed but Unbreakable, together with volunteers, investigated this issue in August 2023.
As we said back in April and May of last year, this is the road of life. Somewhere here we met with residents of the occupied territories when we were delivering humanitarian aid to them. The cargo was then reloaded into their cars, and they took their own routes, bypassing Russian checkpoints, to deliver it to their homes. These are villages that were under occupation.
We faced a food crisis right from the beginning of the full-scale aggression. As early as 5 in the morning, the first explosions began on the territory of the community and enemy columns began to move. In fact, all logistics routes were disrupted, and the local population bought up all the food in the stores in almost 2 or 3 days. The most vulnerable were the children from the orphanage of the Center for Social and Psychological Rehabilitation of Children. After the full-scale aggression, it was impossible to work due to the lack of electricity and heating. Therefore, the center staff took the children to their families.
Yes, indeed, our children have suffered the most from the aggression and food crisis. Many children came to school before the war to get hot meals. There are also families in the village who do not have enough income. They cannot provide their children with everything they need. And they received free meals at school because they belonged to low-income families. After the occupation, these children remained at home and were left without food.
Since the beginning of March, there have been quite serious problems with food. The most important thing is that people did not have bread. From the beginning of March, every working day began in this building. There was no bread almost anywhere, so we baked bread on our own. We had to work in secret. The Russians took away agricultural machinery by force. For this reason, we were afraid to transport anything by truck. For this reason, we transported everything we needed for production through the fields. Then we would quickly drive into the yard of this enterprise and close the gate so that they would not see the car. The Russians could take the car and not return it.
Grain was ground and flour was distributed. There was no water because the pumps were not working. For this reason, we used to go to the spring for water in a car with a barrel.
We loaded bread in this warehouse. During the occupation, all these shelves were filled with trays of finished products.
We used to come to work at 5 in the morning. We needed bread. We needed bread very much. We worked from 5 in the morning. Sometimes we worked until 10 in the evening. We worked even during the curfew of the occupiers. It was very scary to walk. We even walked through bushes to and from work.
My husband and I used to walk because the occupiers could take our car. For this reason, it was impossible to drive.
Hence the traces of Russian aggression that have been imprinted in the hearts of these people for life.
My feelings are extremely suppressed by fear. These impressions will remain forever.
Not good, very bad. I still have very bad feelings.
Valentina had a tragedy. During the occupation, the Russians killed her son. He was a young man.
Not military, but civilian.
A civilian. They took his car and documents and threw them away. Valentina was looking for him everywhere.
Personally, this year I have gone grayer than I have in 10 years. Of course, there are more gray hairs.
At the same time, there are grounds to conclude that the food crisis in these territories was created by the Russian occupiers on purpose.
We were in constant contact with the military district administration. In March, we received the first humanitarian aid from the regional military administration. They brought it here and unloaded it in this building. Then they took it to the villages and distributed it to people. 2 days later, the local Gauleiter and the military came to me with threats and weapons. We will shoot you right here. They threatened me with an assault rifle. He reloaded the machine gun like this. There was a cartridge in the chamber. Then he jumped out. His assault rifle jammed, and he shouted, "I'm going to shoot you now." The claim was simple. There is no Russian humanitarian aid, and you are distributing Ukrainian humanitarian aid from Ukraine.
Why did the Russian occupiers consider the attempts of local authorities and entrepreneurs to feed their fellow villagers a crime for which they could be shot? We managed to find out in another village in the area.
On February 24th, when the full-scale offensive of Russian troops began, we found ourselves under occupation at 8 in the morning. First of all, they brought flour, cereals, and sunflower oil. We began to organize the assistance process. And not only in Prikholotny, but in all the settlements that belong to our village council. During the occupation, we tried to bring some humanitarian aid to our village for people in need. Because what are the elderly, the sick? We met with our volunteers. We tried to do something. They tried to get to us and took the cargo to the village of Pechenihi. They were planning to reboot, but the Russians did not let us through. The situation was not even difficult. It was miserable because the shops were not working. Nothing was working. Everyone was afraid. We were simply not allowed in. They said that if we saw at least one package of Ukrainian aid, we would shoot them.
Did the Russians say that?
Yes, the Russians said that to our guys. I was almost shot. They ran into the office and loaded the machine gun. They put me against the wall, hands against the wall. I had a calendar on the wall. The calendar had an image of Ukraine on it, the anthem. Of course, hands up. I'm standing, and he. Everything. I thought that was it. They'll shoot me. As I understood it, they were trying to use Russian humanitarian aid, which they gave to their supporters.
To traitors.
Of course. They tried to bring people closer to them somehow. A car would approach, and the crowd would just rush in. There was very little food in the car. There was not enough. And people just snatched them out of their hands. And they were filming it and smiling to bring people to this point. This humanitarian aid, 300 or 400 kilograms, which the population was simply raking up.
Hence the question, to what extent can the actions of the Russian aggressor in the occupied territories be compared to the Holodomor of 1933?
Yes, I think we can draw an analogy with the 33rd year. It was last summer, military equipment was coming from Russia. And caravans of trucks loaded with grain and corn were heading toward Russia.
We were robbed. They took about 5,000 tons of our products. The memories will last a lifetime. They are just non-humans. What they were doing here. How they robbed people. They broke into houses. They were constantly holding us at gunpoint. Families tried to avoid going outside.
Hence, the conclusions about the scheme of subjugation of Ukrainian citizens, which emerges from the analysis of the traces of the Russian aggressor in the occupied territories of Kharkiv region. The occupiers are deliberately creating a food crisis. And then they solve this problem with the help of humanitarian aid from Russia, but all this in exchange for submission to the Kremlin regime.
At the same time, it is worth mentioning the food crisis in some African countries that arose in 2023, with the risk of starvation for millions of people. Russia's disruption of grain agreements signed under the auspices of the UN, and then the Kremlin's proposal to resolve the crisis by providing free Russian grain.
In other words, a scheme of subjugation tested in the occupied territories of Ukraine, discovered by the Traces Project together with volunteers in the Kharkiv region.